Hello everybody and welcome to another tutorial in camera and lens repair. And this time I will take my old Olympus Auto-S 1.8 38mm for the Olympus Pen F, because it has a really sticky focusing ring and I would like to grease it. And in that case we of course need to take it apart and do something. We need some tools. It's not that hard, just remember to set marks. We need at least a 1.2mm flathead screwdriver, 1.8 and maybe a 2.5mm. Curved tweezer is also very handy, and something to make marks with. It will say scratches inside the not on the helicoid but beside the helicoid thread. It's really important, because if you just take apart a lens and just say, well, you can just take it apart, and when you come to the assemble point, you missing the details about how is the lens, the focusing assembly measure. And that's really important, because if there was a repair manual, I would think it doesn't tell something about that at all. So what we also need is a measure tool. Caliper can be very handy. And before I get it, I have been into the lens before and make notes. So you maybe see, wow, that's a lot of notes, but they will be very important when you assemble it again. There's no idea, no problem taking apart a lens and just see, okay, so, and when you come to, how do I put it back in again? Yeah. We also need some grease, and I really like the Liqui-Moly LM47 with the MoS2. Well, it's not a universal grease, but I think it works really good. Of course, a brush is also very handy together with the when applying the grease. In case you have problem with, the small set screws here, those and maybe some screws inside can be really hard to unscrew. Well, a cotton bud and some of maybe a few drops of isopropyl alcohol or nail polish remover with acetone. Well, let's go into it. It's not that hard to fix. Just need something. Off with the back lens cap and set the lens to infinity. That's a good starting point here. What we're gonna do is take off the mount. Sits with 3 screws, and there is no idea to take off those 3. No, it's only the outer screws. Then you can come into the back of the lens assembly and see what actually getting off the what's going on here and getting off, taking the whole lens aperture assembly out. Then we just have the naked focusing system. So now we'll try. It's not so good with the 2.5mm. So I will stick with the 1.8, and it's not that hard to get off. At first the screws didn't sit that tight, and this is the old version lens, so it could be different from your lens. So now off of that, the 3 screws come off here. Put the screws in a way of where you can hold things together. I mean, I like to do it when arrange the screws, and of course also the whatsoever retaining ring, mounts, focusing ring, or whatever. Now looking into it, we take it off, and you see it looks like this. The pin here, that is the connection inside to the lens, to the aperture, is also connected to this here. It will say, when we put on the pin here, I will of course show it, but it has to go through the gap between here. So we stick in the pin, see, so the pin goes on at first to the big lever here, and if you have to be at infinity. So you simply, I know it can be difficult to see because of the light. Maybe I can show it here. But this pin has to go between the gap that will come when we put it back in, as you can see here. Now, to get further into it, and you see the 3 screws around here. It sits with some kind of varnish to make the screw, I mean, prevent the screws from loosening by themselves. And we need to unscrew those. But in case the screws are really tight, we could try to apply a little of the isopropyl alcohol and maybe soften the whatsoever varnish they have used back then. Doesn't have to be much, but it's important because then you do not have to destroy the screws. Now see, before open it, I mean unscrew those 3, set a mark here. I make a scratch here, not on the actual this part here, but more on the back of the aperture assembly, because then you know exactly where it should sit, because maybe the holes are a little too big, so you can make some adjustment if it was so. So remember that. So now I can unscrew those 3 screws. And in that way pull out the lens aperture assembly, take it out. And you see marks. That is really important when working with older or newer lenses. Now, so you see all 3 screws are out, and remember how it sits. So now I can actually pull off the whole lens aperture assembly, and I have the naked focusing assembly. So now I put it aside, and we can work on this. And now we come to the more important thing, is to set marks. A few. You see, set the focusing ring to infinity. That's important. Set a scratch down here. So you see in line with that. And beside that, the helicoid key, which sits here, it also need a mark. So as you maybe you don't know if it's a big hole, bigger holes, so the adjustment of the key can be made. But I mean, in this case, it's countersunk screws. So just in case you miss anything, make a scratch here. I mean, it doesn't really matter how many marks you make. Just, I mean, I just made one more, but it doesn't really matter. I know exactly where it sits because the screws make it sit correct at first. So there is no adjustment in this case. And you would have the same, it will be the same, hopefully, in your lens. Now, the focusing ring has to sit correct. So, and we also will make a mark here. So I go up to near end. It will say, where's my mark here? It will say 0.35. I will look at the other end. I also, as I've been into the lens before, set some marks. So this is near end. Just in case you need that, but it's better to have only one reference. But I did this in case I need it. So I simply set a mark here at near end, and also a mark here, and a mark at the stop. Well, it was not that necessary as I thought, so I will simply just be at infinity. What is more important is, you see, the focusing helicoid can be turned, and what is really important, it is you set a mark here in line with the index or the infinity mark, and also in line with that you set another mark here on the inner helicoid in line with the middle helicoid. That's very, very important, because when I take off the focusing ring, the focus helicoid can actually move. So that's my reference point in before I continue disassemble it. But when I set the mark here, I know exactly the position of that. So we can we can loosen the 3 screws around here. Actually, there are 4, and then pull off the focusing ring itself. So set it to infinity here, and then we can unscrew those screw here. And in case it is a bit tight, could be of old thread lock back then, well, we can just add a little on all of them. It doesn't have to be much. Maybe it needs more or less, it depends. I mean, lenses are different. Oh. So now where's the cap? You see, then I can unscrew it when I loosen the 3 screws here, 4 screws. So just loosen them. No need for fully unscrew them. And then so, and this one, and the last one. Let's see, we are at infinity, fine. Then the last screw here. Now, when you pull it off, the stop here has to sit correct. And then I should be able to just pull it straight out. That's it. There's nothing special in here. And then we are directly into the naked helicoid system. And since I have my infinity mark here, but then we go to the next thing here, the middle helicoid, which is the brass helicoid, and the back it will say the outer helicoid. You also set a mark here in line with that. That's also important, because it's your only reference when working with this helicoid. So now I can measure how long is it actually at infinity from the inner front to the very back of the outer helicoid. So let's see. There should be something like, let's see, something like 17 point, well, I set it to around 17.48, and it should be something around there, which is fine. So now I know that, and we can also measure at infinity from the front of the middle helicoid to the back of the outer helicoid. We'll say the black here. So we can also measure that. Let's see how it will be. It's around 17.10 or so. So now I know the exact length there should be, because then if I turn the helicoid without my marks, I have no idea, okay, is infinity where it should be? Well, I don't know. But since I have set those marks, it's extremely important. So now I can take off the helicoid key, which sits with the two countersunk screws. And everything is lined up and marks, so I can just unscrew those two screws. Small, okay, here it is, and it's also this one. And then it comes loose. So now, and then I can just lift off this little helicoid key. It can be a little tight, and it looks like this. And in that way I can begin. And remember, I only take one helicoid at a time, and in this case set the marks in line, all three of them, because that's our starting point. Here they are in line, and here they are in line. So now I simply begin with the inner helicoid and keep fingers onto the outer helicoid and the middle helicoid, so they cannot turn at all. Then I can turn the inner helicoid, which is quite stiff, and the inner helicoid comes off, in this case, after a little over one turn. It will say around 1 o'clock. So if we look at this as a watch, we have 12 up here, and it should come off around over here at around 1 o'clock. So when I unscrew it, I will begin like this. Wow, it's really stiff. So old grease. And my mark is here, 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 here. And when we come up to 12 o'clock, the index mark, I can feel, okay, it begins to be loose. And if we look into the front of it, see, my mark is here, my reference mark is here, and when it comes off, it will say something like there. So it comes off there, and then I set a mark here in line with the, see, the mark is here, my off mark will be here. Set an arrow or something, and maybe you can write in off, just like I did. So now I can just pull it off. Oh, it's really old, sticky grease. I don't know how many years it sits there. Now, the outer the middle helicoid, it will say this one. Just have my notes in. The middle helicoid comes off after a little over 2.5 turns at around 5 o'clock. So again, my reference mark is here, and my off mark would be down here. So see, 12 o'clock is here and 5 o'clock is down here, something like that. So my starting point, my mark, then I can turn it 1, 2, and when it comes off, it will say it begins to be loose, and there it comes off there. I can go down here, and it came off with a mark I already set when I was into it. And it will say it's around 5 o'clock, related to my infinity mark up here. And that's the same thing, very sticky old grease. So now I will just clean it and come back to, I will clean with the petroleum odorless, which I think is fine. It takes away all the greasy stuff. And of course, remember also to clean the helicoid key, because there's also all sticky grease on. So see you soon. So now I have cleaned the helicoid key and the helicoids, so they look like something almost new. Of course it's not. And then I will give it some Liqui-Moly LM47. I have no idea how it will work, but I guess it will be fine. Then with a fine brush, it could be something from the apotheke or so, makeup brush maybe, and we only need a little amount, just to be have to be a film. I mean, just a thin grease film. So I can just begin with the outer helicoid, and the good thing with this, as I see it, grease, is that it have a big temperature range. So we can just add a little. And then wipe away the rest of it. So doesn't have to be much. So something like that. It's just a thin grease film. Now then I add the middle helicoid, get my reference mark, which was this here, and my infinity mark here. So if we turn it there, the off mark must be down here at off. So I can set my inner helicoid at the arrow there and wiggle a little so it will come onto the thread. And then, since we know that, it was 2.5 turns to off. So when I put it on here, the my off mark here, turn a little over half a turn up to my index mark, then I can just give it 2 turns. 1 and 2. Wow, it has a really good feeling. Wow. Now this is good stuff. So let's see how it will be. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to have much more, more than this, since it's just the grease film that make the thing, not the grease movie. So 1.5 turn, and then 1 and 2 turn. So that's it. Now I can take the next one, which will be a bit over 1 turn at around 1 o'clock. And let's see how it will go. So something like that. And it is really difficult to know what kind of grease does actually work on which helicoids. I've tried many, but I think this one is really very good. To me, one of the best, since I cannot get the original grease. So I think it'll be fine. Then I had to hit my scratch I made in the beginning. It will say here, and then I can hit my off mark, which will be here. Try to put it on, and let's see if we're looking into the front. My off mark would be here at 1 o'clock. So I only have to put the other mark in line with that and wiggle a little. Comes off there. Then I can just put it on. Wow! It's much better than I expected to be. Because maybe sometimes it will be a little too thick or so, but this really have a good feeling. So I will just go up and look at my marks here. They just have to be in line with each other. It will say there, and the middle It's also really good. So how does, then I can put in my helicoid key, which of course also need a little lube, especially on the, let's see if I can make it here, especially on each side of it, just a tiny amount. So that's all it has to have. Oh. And then I can add it into the groove here. Close the other side here. Then put it in. Give it some movement. So that's it. And then simply add the 2 screws. Just to have to align it. It will be there. And a small tweezer to the tiny screws here. Oh, come on, little fellow. So there we are. And the other screw here. So you see, when I have my marks, I'll be pretty sure it's the correct way it's sitting. But if not set the marks, well, wow, it's really good. I mean, this grease, oh gosh. You see what's happened? I just came over a little bit of the infinity. So the helicoid key sticks was off the gap down here. So one have to go a little backward and gently. We do not need to. So now it's off. I mean, it's on. So now we are back on track, and just to be sure how it actually is measuring, I'll just measure it. So, and of course, when I have my notes here, it's very, very handy that way. So the marks has to be in line here, the infinity mark. So I can just first take the middle to the back, which will be something like 17.10 millimeter, which is so you can see I'm back on track. And we can also measure from the front of the inner helicoid to the very back. And I mean, to me it looks like it will be all something like the same. Well, it doesn't really matter if it's 0. Yeah, it's something like that. So that's quite good. So then I can simply add my my focusing ring. Remember the infinity mark? I can simply add it here, and it has to go against the stop here, there, and in that way take my screwdriver and simply add, screw in the tiny screws. And I think I don't get what they are 4 screws, but mean, this one is offset. When you look at this, there's one there. This is a different angle. Maybe it's, I don't know. Maybe one have to screw in the 3 screws first, 3 set screws, and then the other at the last, I would think. So don't over tighten them. Have a feeling of, then it's the screws are tight. Then I can screw in the last screw. So now that's it. So let's see how it will be. What's happened here? Oh, it's difficult to hold on onto it with rubber gloves. So now the only thing I need to do is put in the aperture lens assembly, and I think can simply add this, lower it, find the holes. You see the 3 holes here, and then add the tiny brass screws, and then we are back again. Sometimes they can be a little tricky to actually catch the thread. Yeah, it goes fine. That's why it's good with a curved tweezer. So, and the holes are actually quite tight, so there is not any adjustment possible as I see it. Sometimes screws can be really annoying. Yeah. There it is. Maybe I should take the other way around. Be more easy. Yay. Of course, maybe I have tightened the other screws a bit more. Too much. So then I should be able to do it. What is going on here? I mean, this hole is really just a bit more tight than the other screw, the other holes. Yeah, here we are. So it is. Yep. That's it, and then tighten it good, not too much. And of course you can add some varnish around here just to get them, I mean prevent them from coming loose. Wow, this is really good. I'm quite happy with that. So now set the lens to, where's my mark? Here. Set it to infinity, and then it will be easier to put the mount on. If it's at near end, you see it's more difficult to actually get the mount on because the pin in here is too deep in. So we just set it to infinity. Then put it on this side first and then flip it in. I know it can take some time. So that's it, and then here we should be there. Should be there. Maybe if the knob here sticks out a little, yeah. Have to wiggle a little with the small knobs here if it cannot come on. So the only thing I need to do is add the 3 screws around the mount, and then my little lens is actually in good focusing shape again. So as you can see, it's not that hard to do, but you have to be aware of setting all those marks. And you might think, well, it will be destroy the lens, and yeah, but no one will see it. And also the professional does it. And since there is no repair manual for this lens that tells anything about that, well, the only option you have is to make your own marks. So now that's it. Wow, it's really good. I mean, wow. I mean, I like this grease, so I can fully recommend it, and it's really good. So that's all about this lens. Hope you enjoy the content and can use the info. Yeah, that's all. Bye bye. See you.